I have never actually spoken at CAST. Oh, is that shocking? That's shocking. Get out. Actually, I've done a lightning talk. That's it. I have always worked behind the scenes, and I go to other conferences and I speak at other conferences, but this one, I feel very compelled to serve the community in the way that I can serve the community, which is to allow you guys to have a place to confer and work with each other, and when things are going smoothly at the conference, I think that happens. So how about some feedback for the conference organizers? Have things gone smoothly for you? Nice. Thank you to everyone that's been involved. It's been a pleasure. And since this is my first chat to all of you at CAST, I'll just tell you something that's not in my bio, because that's boring. You can read that. I'd rather tell you something about me, because I know some of you. I know some of you quite well. I know some of you a little bit, but some of you I don't know at all. And that's kind of an odd place for me to be, because I actually do enjoy working with people one-on-one. So this is a bit of a strange environment to me, that there are some of you lurking out there that I don't know yet. And the topic here that we have related to the theme of lessons learned, well, it just brings up the concept of retrospectives, which for me is kind of a on-the-fence topic. Sounds like a great idea. Lots of people tell me they don't do them, or they don't do them well, or they're not effective, and that just makes me sad. So I thought I would take kind of a different road with this and take an internal bent on retrospectives. So I'm calling it Introspective Retrospectives. This is not about the team. This is about you. And what I'm going to share with you is my process for doing this, because I am a very experiential learner. I almost can't learn any other way. I try to read. Things like read. It's hard for me. I try to listen. Sometimes I get things, sometimes I don't. I learn best when people tell stories. So oddly, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell some stories. So the first story is just a little bit about me. Ben said I've been in the biz for over 29 years. It's true. I started working in IT in 1984. And it's very interesting to me that not a lot of things have changed in the industry. Some of the same problems that were around then are around today. And that kind of bugs me a bit, so I'm not really interested in talking about that. But wherever I've worked, if I had a desk, if I had an office, if I had a place to be for any period of time, I would end up being Lucy. Now, for those of you that don't know Lucy, Lucy is part of the Peanuts gang. This is a bunch of characters written by Charles Schulz, and they're kind of archetypes. So I'm not like Lucy, because she's kind of nasty and mean, and she's a bit of a trickster, and I'm nothing like that, really, I'm not. But she has this little gig going on. So it's not a lemonade stand. You walk up to her little shack, and she says, "The doctor is in. Come tell me your woes and your stories," and she'll tell you how to get your life together, how to fix it, whatever it is. She'll give you advice. Now, I'm not all that big on giving advice, and here's why. It says guidance or recommendations concerning prudent future action. Ooh, I really don't know if I want to influence somebody else's prudent further actions. I think I want them to influence that themselves. And then it says typically given by someone regarded as knowledgeable. Several people have called me knowledgeable, bless you. I'm always flattered by that. But the other word, authoritative, that is a word I don't like. And I've been called a lot of things in my life, but one of the things that's most offensive to me is expert. I don't feel I am an expert at anything. I feel like I'm a fledgling human, and I learn some stuff, and I share some stuff, and some people tell me that stuff is useful, and that makes me happy. And that's about as good as it gets for me. So I take this notion of giving advice and guidance because it's a natural thing for me. And I've woven it into my career because not only is it natural, it's a strength. So I want to capitalize on that. So kind of taking that to the disclaimer level, I am not an expert. I will never say that, and if someone else says that about me, I'll just disagree. I'm not a fan of best practices or dogma or one way to do anything. None of that stuff ever makes sense to me, so I'm not going to say anything like that. But I might say something that provokes you to think, make a decision, take an action. That's what I'm looking for. So please take responsibility for anything you take away from this. Don't blame me, okay? So one of the reasons why I wanted to focus on retrospectives is because I truly believe this notion, because I live it. Nice quote, Kierkegaard, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. I like that. And it really speaks to me because in my job, I do training, I do a lot of training. I've been doing it for about 15 years now. I've reflected back on my career and a lot of the foibles and missteps and unhappy times and occasional happy times and occasional successes. And I can go back to this experience over and over and over again and pull out new lessons and different things I didn't know I tripped over back then, things that I didn't realize would be interesting to me now, things that guide how I interact with people and what I suggest and what I share with people that have the same dilemmas that I did when I was doing their job day in and day out. And that is almost shocking to me. Most of us, when we do a retrospective, say on a project, if we do it very short term, make some notes, take some actions, put it on the back burner and move on to the next. And that's all very reasonable to do. But I think there's more things that we can learn from that. So I just took a little snippet from a study that was published in 2005, so it's a little out of date, and things have changed since then, but this is basically my concern. It was done in MIS Quarterly Executive, and the whole thing is about retrospectives, the success of them, and when you do them, the two things that you evaluate, the success or failure of any particular thing. And what it says is organizations rarely do formal ones. Now, I certainly hope we're doing more than we used to, or at least at this moment in time. But I encounter people 10 to 50 strong at a time in a class who tell me over and over and over again that they're supposed to do retrospectives, that it's supposed to be a good process, they're supposed to learn from it, they're supposed to change things, and that's not what happens. And that's kind of amazing to me that that's not what happens. So we talk about it a little bit and we try to noodle, what's the thing? Why doesn't that happen? And I have a couple of ideas in my head. Maybe you have some. I think people are generally resistant to change. We get in our ruts, we have our habits, we have our comfort zone, and it's hard to get an entire group to get out of its comfort zone at the same time. I think that's reasonable. Also, I don't know if any of you feel this way, but when you go through a retrospective, Sometimes the light is shining on you, and it's uncomfortable to admit some kind of failure or mistake or misstep or misunderstanding. And so sometimes we kind of fight it off. Anybody uncomfortable in those situations? Anybody? I live for this kind of feedback. It doesn't make it easy. So I thought that we could kind of have the backdrop of doing project level retrospectives, but talk about doing it personally. I think the more that we get used to using this technique and we kind of tune our own machine for critique, feedback, assessment, improvement, brainstorming, all of those types of things, I think we can get better at it in the group as well. So this paper that was published talks about evaluating various things in a project on 2 scales. Success or failure, they have a rating scale, so success of 1, failure of 5, and they catalog all these things. And the funny thing is, they had situations where they could claim a project success and yet some other kind of significant failure, like a product failure or something like that. And I think that's very interesting. So we've got success. I kind of think of it as you reach a goal. You shot for something, you reached a goal. I like that. Antithesis, failure. Now, that picture is kind of disturbing to me. And I think failures in real life are a bit puzzling with big stuff like this. When you're looking at software failures, I don't know, I think we get used to it after a while, but still, they're spectacular when they happen, and they're very, very exciting, but that's not exciting, that's just scary. I lived in Boston for 20 years, and I don't know how many of you heard of this public works project called the Big Dig. This is one of the reasons why I left. So I lived just outside of town, and there was this tiny bridge that goes over the locks at the head of the Charles. It's a river that goes through the city. And it's a really, really tiny bridge, very, very congested all the time. And they decided that it needed to get moved over 6 inches. And there's no way around, right? This is the only way in. So if you couldn't go that way, you had to drive like to New Hampshire and come back. So this was really challenging. And as they were trying to rework the bridge, this is kind of interesting, they did it from both ends, building it out this way. And then it didn't match up. It was a very disturbing bug. That was just one of the things that happened on the Big Dig. Now, when you talk about epic fails, right? Epic fails are interesting. Some of them are sad. When the tunnel under the city opened, the first day it was open, something in the roof fell on a van and did some major damage to a family in the death sort of way. Many, many, many things went wrong on that project. And I actually lived in the, how do I describe this? It was like the stable. It was actually the in-law apartment, but it used to be a stable on this farm. So these folks had the main house. They were renting out this little apartment. That's where I lived. And she was one of the major project managers for the Big Dig. And, one day I just kind of said, hey, what up? What's going on with that? You got some stories? I'm really interested. And what they had done was they had some real goals about quality up front, which is a pretty common thing to do. And then as they started to get the bids in, they realized that they were going to blow the budget. So they started to get bids that were for less money and competitive bids to find out who was the lowest bidder and taking that one. And the lowest bidder apparently gave us some bolts that were kind of stripped or something, small detail. But that's interesting to me, these failures. Now, I hope all the failures that we have in our projects and in our lives are not so dramatic. But to to kind of kick off this concept, I want to share something with you that's very personal to me. And it demonstrates success and failure. And I think looking at something that you've done in your life, regardless of the outcome, and trying to figure out what nuggets you can take from that to go to the next challenge in your life is really what the whole thing is all about. I'll call it a journey, if that makes sense. So one of my journeys, one of my little side journeys, and I know this is a little difficult to see, is I took up figure skating. I think I was bored. I didn't have enough challenges in my life. Actually, I was kind of stressed. Do you ever get stressed at work? You just got too much going on? Well, let me tell you something. When you have two thin blades on your feet and everything around you is ice, the only thing you're worried about is your butt hitting the ground. Nothing else is in your mind. It's amazing. It's liberating. It was wonderful. I went at it for a couple of years. I took some local classes and I got badges, ooh ah. There's nothing like being an adult skating with kids like this. There's a couple things that you learn, right? They're twirling around, they're flipping, they're doing whatever, and they're learning really fast. And I'm like, gravity is not working for me. And you learn about things like, I never took physics. But there's a lot of physics involved in skating, and you learn all about it with your face and whatever. So I enjoyed this. I really did. It was kind of a little place to just run away and hide and challenge myself. And a couple of my friends, I don't know, there's one in the back row, right, Jane? Suggested I compete. And I'm like, why would I want to compete? I could barely stand up. It was just a weird concept. She said, well, when you put yourself in that situation, you focus more, you work harder, you have a goal. Kinda, all right, I'm in. So I started to do little tiny competitions, and I got more badges. It was wonderful. And then, it actually happened, so this was in, maybe 93, 94-ish. There started to be some adult figure skating events and competitions. And I'm like, that's kind of cool. I can skate with people my size. So I was feeling good, like I'm not going to hurt anybody. Too bad. So I went for this one competition and put together a program and choreographed to music, and then you got to have the dorky little outfit. It just, the whole thing is just a counterculture that I really wasn't acclimated to as a almost 30-year-old. So then this pretty real competition came along. It was in Martha's Vineyard. And it was the first real competition I went to. And there was one person in my class. So classes in skating are like levels. So there's the really sucky level. That's where I was. And then there's the less sucky levels and other less sucky levels. And then people that can actually do stuff that you would recognize as skating. All right, so let's just be really clear. I want to set your expectations as low as I possibly can, okay? And I wasn't really acclimated to this whole competition thing. I made a major faux pas with my coach she always wanted me to skate to Disney stuff and never really figured out that I wasn't a tall child. I was really an adult. She didn't quite get that. And so the whole thing, I just felt no need to have a coach there. I just felt like, going for a skate. So I did my little thing. The person that I was up against did her little thing. She was a local. So I thought the local girl would be in like Flint, right? I didn't think I had a chance. But no, I beat her out. I got a gold medal. Oh, that's stood on the podium and I almost killed myself getting up there. And then because you're on the skates and it's just a mess. And I actually just turned to her and I went, wow, I'm sorry. I didn't come here to just rain on your parade. So a little while later, we got some news about the first adult nationals competition in the US. And they had sucky level. So I thought, hey, I can do this. And it turned out I actually wasn't quite good enough to do sucky level. I didn't have all the moves, but I thought competition is good. It makes me practice, it makes me work. As a matter of fact, it made me work so hard, I injured myself. And I was off the ice and almost off my foot for about 5 weeks before the competition. And in this competition, it's a little more like what you see in the Olympics or TV. There's 2 programs. So there's a technical program, and then there's a artsy-fartsy program, whatever. And so I'm getting ready for this. I get hurt, ankle's bad, go to the doc, says, stay off it. I went, should I just bail? Do you ever feel like that? Should I just bail? Because I don't think this is going to go well. Or do I just jump in for the experience? I don't bail on much, and I'm not really afraid of any experience. But after I've been bitten, maybe I would be, but in this case, it was all new. So it was in Wilmington, Delaware. I'm going to play a video for you. The music is horrid, so please forgive that. And the video's a little dark because it actually was on this weird thing that you might not know about, a VHS tape, right? It's just, so I apologize in advance for the quality, but I think you'll get the point. So bear with me.
Our first speaker this morning, representing the North Shore Skate Club in Columbus, Massachusetts, please welcome John Haynes.
For the 4 people who knew what that was. You know, it just wasn't the way I practiced it. And it was the last thing on my mind, actually. Now, what's really kind of funny about this is that this is the first time I had ever seen myself skate. I'd never had a video taken. I had no idea what I looked like. And after I looked at this, I'm like, why did anybody let me go out there? What are you, not my friends or my family. I don't know any of you. You let me wear that goofy little dress. I slow, and then I understood like all the things my coach was telling me, like the things started to click. So you know what, there are ways, there are techniques for doing good retrospectives and doing good research and analysis about your own challenges, flaws, weaknesses, and strengths. And it would have been much better if sometime before this I had seen a video, because then maybe I would have bailed. I don't know. But even funnier than that is as I am sliding towards the boards, and that's why I fell, because I was supposed to be going down the rink the long way. And I just got turned around, and I was turned around facing the boards, and the judges were right on top. So there I am, and smash. But what was beautiful about the smash was it was like this. So the judges actually didn't see me fall, which was awesome. And so I'm there on the ground. You saw me, I got up like a cat, right? Like, no one saw that. Right? Just like, get me out of here. But the referee, who's sitting where the judges are, leans over the table and he's like, are you all right? And I was like, sorry. Right? And luckily, there's kind of an interesting thing about skating judging, and I actually looked into getting into judging, be a judge, right? Because if you can't actually do the thing, you judge it. Isn't that what? That's the way to go. And it just unfortunately took too much time. But as soon as the music is over, they are no longer judging the presentation and scoring anything. So I was reasonably satisfied and mortified at the same time. So a success, I did it, got up, couldn't walk, like I had ice on my foot, and I thought, wow, now we get to do this again tomorrow. Awesome. So let's look at tomorrow, okay? So sorry to make you suffer through. All my friends are there this time. Where were they the other day? Clearly the only move I can do, because I've done it like 12 times already. Forgetting choreography, I have no idea what I'm doing. Thank you so much. The very interesting thing about those two programs is the second one was the failure. Very much so. I had not practiced it in over 6 weeks. I had no memory at all of what I was supposed to be doing. I'm like, hey, I can do one of these. And it was just like a long string of, hey, I can do that, and now I can do that, and then I didn't fall over, so that's good, and then I can do that. And I really just had no clue. And it felt terrible, but I didn't fall. I like this quote here. Success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. So the question is, would you go back and skate the next day? Interesting. I think it's hard to fail. I think it's sometimes demoralizing. I think sometimes it steals our energy and our thunder and our passion. And yet, sometimes going back just that next time with a different perspective, seeing a video of yourself, hearing somebody say something that you said, somebody giving you feedback, any of those things can sort of change your approach and your perspective. So I want to talk about this introspection method. Basically, with everything I do, I overanalyze it. Any of you have analysis paralysis? I want it to be perfect or good. I got a little perfect problem, so I just kind of shoot for good now, or I bail completely, right? If I don't think I can do good, I'm out. And maybe that's not good. But one of the things about introspection is knowing what those things are for yourself. And I know. So for example, when I go on a job interview, which I don't really do anymore, but I used to. I've worked first at an insurance company, working in the IT team. Then I worked for a hospital. I did hospital administration and finances and took care of all their systems for 5 years. And then moved into high-tech, various high-tech companies. And every time I would go on an interview, I would explain all the reasons why you don't want to hire Dawn. I'm problematic in oh so many ways, but the interesting thing about it is I know exactly what they are. And if I'm going to join a team, and we need to have synergy, we need to work together, if I'm going to have a boss or a manager, and we need to be on the same page, I do not want to surprise that person, because I don't think it'll be good for them and I don't think it'll be good for me. So I always try to be very upfront, aware, honest, share those things. And when I'm working in a team for the first time, if you don't know me, I will tell you exactly what I'm all about. What's likely to be problematic for you? What's likely to be problematic for me? And I think if you can do that in your teams, if you're that self-aware that you can get that conversation going, then I think you kind of get in and you make a little more progress. Have any of you heard of the 5 dysfunctions of a team? Anybody? I love this book, and I did a presentation at one of the SQE conferences about it, and applied it to testing and software projects, and I thought it was pretty interesting. But there's, these 5 dimensions, these things that you have to address, and at the bottom of the pyramid is trust. And I think one of the ways to engender trust is to speak openly and honestly about yourself and about others. So say you have, I don't know, a particular challenge, a minor character flaw. I'm no good at math. I'm really blunt. And I don't care really all that much. I just know that I am, and that doesn't work for everybody. So there was a time that I was more blunt than I am now. It's hard to imagine. And I identified that as a target, something that I needed to work on to work more effectively with people and to gain more success for the things that I wanted to do, for the things that I wanted to share, the things that I wanted to be a part of. I did not want to be the person to take down the ship. So that's just one of them. So I target it. Then I do some research. I do some research on my own. I do audio tapes of myself, conversations. I'd talk to people after meetings that I trusted, and I would say, can you give me some feedback? Maybe I'd do some reading in, I don't know, a psychology magazine, or, just go get psychoanalyzed or something like that. Then, hopefully through this process, I'll reveal something. Either the source, the root cause, the trigger. Maybe I reveal something like a coping mechanism or a way to handle that that turns into an action. I want everything to lead to an action. Because if I can't fix it, I don't really want to spend time analyzing it because that just makes me grumpy. So part of this, and part of the success of this, is that you're really, really open to it and that you can perform this reflection. And I would guess that there's a lot of you that are very hard on yourselves, probably too hard on yourselves. I bet you don't deserve half the criticism you give yourself. And I bet some of that criticism actually stops you from doing things and participating in things. So I invite you to think of a couple of those things, tackle one and say, what's getting in my way? And if those things have been your roadblocks in the past, or you consider them to be failures, reflecting on them can be so painful, you might not want to do it. So I just invite you to try not to judge it so much, if at all. It's just a thing. It's just a thing. How does that thing work? Analyze, explore, try again, ask for help. How many of you really don't like to ask for help? For any of you that were waiting in the registration line, Paul and I kind of have this joke. I will not accept help. He knows. So we asked, do you need help? And I'm like, no. You know, there's like 30 of you stand out there. No, go away. It's just a thing. And so we have an understanding. He'll just jump in and help because I'm too, dumb to ask for it. And that's a friend, all right? That's a support system. That's somebody who understands your goofiness well enough to blow right by it. And that's valuable. That makes a working relationship better. It might even make a personal relationship better. So these things might actually kind of overlap in your life and change the dynamics of how you interact. So I'm inviting you all to think about filing bug reports on yourself. Now, I know what some of mine are, so I told you about the math thing. I've actually tried to fix the math thing, and I just feel more dumb. So I got little math programs, and I'm on Lumosity, and I'm trying to do all the math things. And no, every day I do them, I get worse. It's not possible that I could be getting dumber every day, right? I think, one day I might be able to go up. So it's just really puzzling to me. But there are things that actually create enough rift in my life and enough challenge in my working relationships and personal relationships that I want to go after them. So I'm going to reflect on some things that I tackled about 15 years ago when I became a tester for the first time. And I worked at this little company called Xerox Imaging Systems. It was a wholly owned subsidiary of Xerox, and Kurzweil computer products, and some little data copy scanners. And we did OCR software. So for those of you that aren't familiar with OCR, it's like, look at the big brain on Bob. It's neural net technology, AI technology, so the whole thing had a learning engine. It was incredibly complicated and really cool. And I started there in tech support. So I was good at troubleshooting, and when I was little, did you ever have this thing that when you were little you say, when I grow up I want to be? Did any of you say, I want to be a software tester? Anybody? It's happening now, occasionally, which is so cool, but I couldn't get to that. All I could come up with was two things. I want to help people. That's kind of vague. And I don't want to get my hands dirty. I have no idea. So that takes out gardening and no painting and like, there's just a whole bunch of, I'm not going to be a grease monkey. I was into cars. I had an uncle that had an auto body shop, and I just walked around the whole time going, ew, just get this off me. So I kind of knew that that was a requirement, and it was all okay until I was in an office and I met toner, right? It didn't work anyway. So I thought I was there. So the job and role in customer service, tech support, helping people was a good one. It was also technical. It was fun. I took on a lot of stuff. I learned. I cross-trained on all the products, and then I kind of hit a wall. Any of you ever hit a wall in kind of, you know, your career and where you're at, and you wonder, what's next? So we had a fishbowl. Anybody know what that is? Yep, windows, right, and a big set of cubes. So there were 8 of us in the fishbowl. And across the hall was the other fishbowl. And the testers were in the other fishbowl. They were actually called QA. So one day, a job opened up, and I walked across the hall, and magically, I was a QA engineer. That's all it took, 4 steps. And I was a giant test team of 1 on my project. I was left alone, kind of like a mushroom. I was lonely. There were no requirements. There were no people. There were no books. There were no training classes. There was nothing. And I really couldn't figure out what I needed to do, so I just started attacking the software. One might call me rogue. I was evil. Evil, mad scientist, bad, bad, bad. I broke Unix boxes. I broke so many Unix boxes that the IT team fired me and said, you have to maintain your own Unix machines because we don't have time for you. Okay? So, one of the things that happened, can't remember how long I was there, maybe a week, 2 weeks, all alone, no one. And then one day, this guy walks in the lab, and he goes, so, how's it going? And I'm like, what are you doing in my lab? And he says, I'm the new project manager. I'm like, what's a project manager? And he was a fresh youngling, just fresh MBA. He had no idea what he was doing, and neither did I. And he said, so when do you think you're going to be done testing? I just went, never. I said, what a stupid question. Never. When the sun explodes, twice. Right? Get out. And he's like, no, I need a real answer. And I'm like, go away. And so he came back the next day and he asked the same question. I'm like, didn't I tell you yesterday to go away? And the third day, brave. The third day he came back. Lucky I didn't have any weapons in there. But he came back again and I said, dude, I cannot give you any other answer than never. Because I calculated over 144,000 configurations that I needed to test. We OCR'd into 11 languages. We had hardware platforms, software platforms, multiple Unix, just bad, 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 bad. And I had no way to know how to pick. Remember, no requirements, never went to a project meeting, and this guy wants a when. No. So I told him in blunt terms, you should go away and never come back. Ship it whenever you want, because I have no idea what done means. I have spent, since then, a lot of time not really understanding what done means, but every once in a while I'm delivering a training class and I go back to that experience and I'm like, I was such a moron. I had no idea how to ask this guy a question. I didn't know how to engage with him. I did not understand anything about the facet of the project, the customers, or anything. And you know what? If I went back, I never go back. I never go back, I just move forward. I never want to redo history. But if I went back, I would have asked one question. Who's our primary customer? And that's only because of retrospect, because I know now It was the US government. They're the only, who else would use OCR on Unix? Do the math. There's like 3 people on the planet that use desktop, applications on Unix. Duh, I should have thought of that. But the interesting thing about the government, so let me be clear, these are 3-letter agencies, most of which will not be named. So we're talking the NSA, the DoD, and other spooks. And so when something is not going to work for OCR, we normally say to a customer, can you send us the document? Are you picturing this conversation? And they're like, hell no. I'm like, well, I guess that conversation's over. Good luck with that. So we actually, in my whole time there, I was there for 5 years, we got 1 document from them. It was 99% redacted. Big black magic marker, and there was like a letter A. Well, at least I can tell the font. I can actually do something with that now. So I sucked. I had no clue how far in the weeds I was. And I didn't even know I was there, so I didn't even know to ask for help. But now you know I wouldn't have anyway, right? I wouldn't have, so it wouldn't have mattered. Now, another thing that I frequently go back to and learn, by the way, this guy and I are still not friends, just to be clear. Prediction. Some days I think I'm brilliant at prediction, maybe even a little psychic. Yeah, and one of the things that I felt pretty psychic about were the types of problems that customers had and what they would like, what they wouldn't like, things like that. So when I encountered a bug and I was filing a bug, any of you take bug advocacy, right? So, how to champion the bug. So my idea of championing a bug was to just go beat someone down, right? You gonna fix that? You gonna fix that? No, you gonna fix that? I'll get you a sandwich. Whatever it will take. But I believed I had the yardstick for how important these issues were going to be. I really did. I thought I had a bead. And through, I'd say, about the next 10 years, I did a copious amount of research on my thoughts. So the research I did was with real customers that we were aligned with. Technical support folks, so people that were talking to customers day in and day out. We'd have conversations with district sales managers about how do you think these things are going to impact your customer base. And over that period of time, all informal research, by the way, I have to sadly say I was right about 50% of the time, which is boring. So I shouldn't have said anything anyway. So even when you're really confident, not always right. And another thing that turned out to be a bit actually problematic was this fierce honesty and bluntness that I have. Apparently people don't like to hear things like, well, that sucks. I know, no, it really sucks. Don't do that. That's bad. Customers will not like that. And I just didn't really have, how do you call it? Was it couth? Or, any of that stuff, right? That nice stuff. But I was passionate about it. I was really sincere, but when I cared about something, when it mattered to me, I would not relent. I was like a pit bull. I needed to soften that a bit. So I actually found a couple of mentors. I seeked these people out. They were both in this company. One of them was a project program manager type person, and I asked her to help me with soft skills, which I have none that I'm aware of. So she took me on, and it was amazing. And I'd go in her office a dozen times a day and say, I have to say something to this person. Can we just role play it a little bit? Because I'm feeling a little harsh. A little rough, and she would get emails, she'd read my emails and give me feedback, and just all kinds of, anytime it was important, I would work with her and she would work with me. I cannot thank her enough for her angelic patience with me and just the time that she put in. Other mentor that I identified was our VP of engineering. Because I actually was looking at getting into development, and I wasn't sure if that was the path I should be on. So we worked together, and these folks formally as a mentorship, and then several other people in the company that I relied on to coach me from time to time. So I'd say, hey, you know that thing I do that's not good? Can you pay attention to that? And if I do that, just throw something at me in the meeting. Or have people take you aside after and say, that thing, it's showing. So some of those things were about vocabulary, style, and tone. So you might not be able to tell, but I've come a really long way. And still working on it. It's a work in progress. I decided to teach professionally. And that's my passion, and that's where I channeled that. And they all helped me find that path. Not exactly sure whether I would have found it on my own. So I'm ever so grateful to them. And to kind of wrap up how I think about this exchange of information, is this very broadly. We all have something to learn and we all have something to teach all day, every day. Every day. And one of my colleagues at Xerox Imaging Systems, Ted Squire, Ted is living in Ireland now with his lovely wife. My favorite quote from him, every day's a school day. And he lives it. And we worked really well together and kind of got each other excited and charged about going to the next thing. So his little thing to work on was, how shall we say, what's the antithesis of PC? Just raunchy or something? I don't know. He was bad. Paul, yes, exactly. Yes, very good. This guy was like an HR lawsuit waiting to happen. So he'd come and ask me questions and like, so how does that sound? I'm like, don't say that. Yeah. So I had something to teach, although I did often tell him, I don't really think I'm a good bar. So I invite you to think about what you can do with your personal retrospectives. Are there things that you know that you're willing to share with other people, formally or informally? Writing a blog, tweeting, some of you share some amazing stuff. All of you that participated in the lightning talks and offered, that is an amazing effort, especially first-timers. Kudos to you for doing that and sharing your information. And if everybody remembers in their little packet, you have smileys. So if you've not done something rogue with your smiley stickers are for dot voting on the lightning talks. All of the lightning talk names and titles that we heard yesterday are against the windows in the grand terrace. So if you can all do your voting before the end of lunch today, we'll have a couple of those to finish out our day. The last thing I'd leave you with is the notion of who can you inspire with the knowledge and the information you have. And the reason why I say that is I'm going to go back to skating for just 1 second. I got a phone call last year from one of my colleagues at Xerox Imaging Systems, Robert Shukatowicz. And Robert, lovely guy, he was kosher, Jewish, he brought his lunch every day, so we never really hung out. He was just one of those folks that had a big brain, really big brain, and worked on this core OCR stuff. Nice guy. And we used to talk every once in a while, but not that often over the course of 5 years. And he calls me up out of the blue, and he said, I was just wondering how you are. I was like, okay. Good to hear from you. Wow, how are you? And he was just wondering what's going on in the life of Dawn, and he told me the oddest thing, something I never ever would have expected. He said, you are a household name in my family. And I was like, what did I do? I'm pretty sure I didn't mean that. Whatever it is, I didn't mean it. No lawsuits, anything like that. And he said, no, I inspire my children with the story of Dawn. And I was like, yikes, do I do what? My goodness. And he said, I remember you walking through the hallways at work with your skates on because I had to break them in. And so, of course, everybody's asking me, what are you doing? I'm like, nothing. And he said, he was so proud of me because I went and did something as an adult that was really difficult to do, and I didn't care how it came out, and I didn't care about being embarrassed. I was just brave, and he inspires his kids with that story. You want to do something, you just do it like Dawn did. And I'm like, hallelujah, brother. Oh, no, not that one. I'm sorry, the other one, whatever. Good going, Rob. So my motto, and my motto has been this since I was actually that small and not on skates. I want to live with no regrets, period, end of story. I decide intentionally everything I'm going to do, and if it's a bad decision, oops, I make a different decision next time. I don't regret. And I love this quote, there are just no mistakes. The events we bring upon ourselves, no matter how unpleasant, are necessary in order to learn what we need to learn. Whatever steps we take, they're necessary to reach the places we've chosen to go. Richard Bach. I wish you all the best on your journey and hope I encounter you at some point.
It's only a couple of minutes over. Way better than John did yesterday.
I wasn't competing.
All right.
John, how do you do on skates? Yeah,
I'm sure you skate better than John. All right. I have 62. Oh, and those of you following at home, I do now have a hotel for tonight.
Yeah, because you're not in my room.
And not with Don.
Right? Yep, nope.
Anybody else? Nope. Down here, 3. That's it. And if you're following along online, please tweet. Sorry, I'll move ahead a few years. Please tweet to @AST_news your question, and it will be read out, and Don will answer it. So I have 62, 112, and 3. Anybody else? Did I miss anybody? All right, start with 62 right there.
Hi, thanks for your talk. On the topic of personal bug reports and like doing some introspection and finding areas for improvement, when you do that, do you actually capture them somehow other than in your head? Do you like write them down? Do you have some sort of product backlog for your own personality?
I would say it depends on how complex it is and how aware of it I am. So if I'm very aware of it, and just talking or interacting, I go, oh, don't do, if I can catch myself, no. So the quick fix, no. But if it's more complex than that, I will often write it out, if that makes sense. It's not necessarily writing the bug, but what do I think about it and ways that I can deal with it. Maybe even a list of pros and cons. Sometimes that's how I start, because I think sometimes we defeat ourselves, because if we don't really buy into the thing being a problem, right? If somebody else tells us it's a problem, but we don't buy into it being a problem, we're not going to fix it, right? We're going to put it on the back burner. So that's one of the ways I try to illustrate it for myself. But no, I do not have any running catalog. I just kind of have amnesia almost every day, where I say, oh, it's a whole new world. Wow, it still sucks. Okay, right, we'll get right on that. But I think doing that, just like a to-do list or anything else where you just need to have it present, is actually a much better idea. Thanks. Hey, John.
Hey, Don. So in teaching skiing, and now it sounds like in teaching other things, including skating and testing.
I learned skiing too, right around the same time.
Yeah, we have a saying as a ski instructor that if you're not falling, you're not learning.
Right.
And that translates into testing, in that I've had several conversations here where people are like, how do we bring things back? How do we get something for the next days back on the job, which usually involves some risk of falling. How did you get past your risk of fear of falling, maybe even?
Well, I'll tell you that with regard to skiing, because it was actually, I fell very infrequently on skates. because I don't know, I was just too scared, or I just thought I'd look silly. I don't know what it was, but I just didn't. But when I was skiing the first time, I was on the bunny hill. You know what that is? That's the hill that's like this. I screamed and squealed all the way down. And, you know, I was like, can't we do this in the parking lot? Because this feels very dangerous. You got these two boards on the feet and the ice and the whatever, it's not good. But when I finally took lessons and I got comfortable just doing the basic stuff, I still wasn't confident. So I really, as you say, really wasn't learning, really wasn't pushing it. And then one day, someone clocked me, hit me. I was in the middle of a hill. This guy was like, I don't know, rolling like a big snowball. And he came and he clipped my skis out from under me, and I fell flat on my face up the hill across his skis. So I had this big mark. I crushed my sunglasses in my jacket, wind knocked out of me, and I'm on my face, and I'm like, I'm not dead. Cool. And after that, only after that, did I get brave enough, because I thought whatever I could do falling couldn't suck as much as that. So it helped me get over that. And both skating and skiing at that time in my life were real teachers for me in bravery and failure and try again and all of that stuff. So it was a real lesson. So thank you for bringing back my skiing. I'm cold all of a sudden.
Jesse, Jason, 83, same thread.
I coach skating, actually. And
I'm
you reminded...
sorry. Wipe it. Can I get you a Brillo pad for your brain?
Well, not that kind of skating. I coach speed skating, actually.
Nice.
And I teach little kids. I taught adults, too. That's how I started. Nice. Teaching adults is very different than kids, but that's another story.
It's difficult. They don't listen, those adults. You tell them this,
yeah,
you tell them
but
that.
you can give them the physics about what they're supposed to be doing. Kids just look at you like, sort of like new testers. No, what I actually stood up to say is, you caught me with what you used to say about skiing. In skating, we say it a little bit differently, and I think it applies to a lot of what we've heard about zombie testers and steady eddies this past week, and it's, if you're not falling, you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So I fell for you. Now twice you know about it.
So Don, I first off, I want to say congratulations for going out and doing something as a 30-year-old that most people don't ever even do in their lifetimes. And I relate with this because I had a very similar situation happen right at about the time I turned 30. I went into competitive snowboarding. And I raced and jumped and hurled myself and did all sorts of stuff for several years.
Of course you did.
The whole deal. So one of the things I found valuable in that experience as well, which I think ties into your topic and into your whole experience, is what possessed me to do that at that age. I could have just ridden and just had a good time and free rode for the rest of my life. Why did I feel a need to compete? And I think the reason is that because when you start surrounding yourself with people that share that, they share your passion, number one. You're not going to strap a board on your feet, put yourself in cattle blocks with 6 people, and run the risk of having a pileup that could send you to the hospital if you're not really into it. But you hang with these people, and these people inspire you, and they make it so that you are just so, it raises the bar exponentially every time. I mean, people look at me and they say, what possessed you to race border cross for 5 years? I said, real simple, Adam Neal, who's a name probably nobody here knows, and that's not a big deal, but he's a guy who's about 8 years older than me, and he went to the nationals at Breckenridge yearly in the open competition and spanked 18 and 25-year-olds. The guy was fantastic. He was my hero and role model. And if anybody wants to tweet out to say a shout out to Adam Neal, I will make sure he gets it. What I'm saying is that the people you surround yourself, their enthusiasm cannot help but affect yours. Right. And that that drive, everybody else's drive will help drive you as well. So include that as well with your personal. It's not just you.
Absolutely.
Other people will share what they do, and it will inspire and bring you to levels that you would never have imagined yourself being.
And I think you bring up a good point, because I assume many of you started out as the lone tester. And it's interesting, if you don't find the right group to inspire you and encourage you, they can actually drag you down. And in some organizations, I don't know about outside the US, but we'll call it lowest common denominator. Scott Barber, where are you, Scott? Scott likes to talk about education in the US, not fondly, by the way. And he talks, so what is it, no child left behind, which means everyone's a moron? Is that? All children left behind. Right, so you work to the lowest level, right? So if you blow the bell curve, you're bad. Right? So if you do really well, they want to drag you down. And I have worked in some teams that really wanted to do that. Like when I was a go-getter in tech support, I got people telling me, don't take so many calls. We want to chill. And I'm like, why? It's that sort of thing. Surround yourself with people that will encourage you. Please.
So, number 3.
Paul, correction.
Oh, yellow.
Oh, sorry.
So on the new thread list, I have 3, which we'll get to after the same thread, and no number Anne-Marie and 104. And a red card from John. Can you clarify what the current thread is? The current thread is what John started, and I didn't make a note of it.
We'll go with current thread as education.
Education. There we go.
So I think there's a very strong dynamic between education and testing, and obviously learning and teaching. Testing is really in the school systems is done by who else but the teachers, and so it's very natural to me. It makes sense to me that you would enjoy teaching, and I think many of us do. I know I do. So I just think that there's a very strong dynamic there for us to exploit and learn more about in terms of teaching, testing, learning, education. So
Agreed. And for me, because I don't know really if it's brain damage or not, but I hear tell that mom let me fall out of my crib or something, and I hit my head. For me, in order to learn some things, some complicated things, I actually have to learn how to teach them. And if I do that, I've got it. But if I can't get that far, I'm just sunk. So it depends on what it is, but stylistically, I think that's a method of learning, along with kinesthetic, auditory, visual, all those types of things. Thanks.
So we talk a lot about success and failure, and what's your advice or experience about, you have a goal, and you start off with the goal and it's going pretty good, and you don't quite get there, but you're not failing either, so when do you give up? Like, when is it, has the world told you, you're not going to get it?
Never give up, never surrender. I just can't. I can't. If it's something I want, I'm happy, say the ceiling is 10 and I'm at 9 3/4. Oh well. Right? If it's something I want, I don't give up because I can't reach it. So for example, with the skating thing, I didn't have the skills that I needed to compete at that level, the lowest level. But it didn't stop me, which means I knew there was no way I could win, but I'll tell you this. Jean actually looked at the results. I never did. And she told me I wasn't last. So see, some days it's good enough. Does that make sense? Thanks.
Anne-Marie, new thread.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, John. John, same thread. I apologize. I was distracted. Wait for the mic.
Thank you. Sorry, Don. I have to disagree. I think we give up all the time. You've given up many jobs. You've moved on. You've evolved. We have to shed that dead skin. So it's not never give up, never surrender, unless it's something you deeply care about and you're frustrated and that passion is still there. But I have to push back on you on this because I've seen you give up
Oh, so the
unproductive
frame,
things.
just, and maybe you didn't hear it, the frame was you're not failing, but you're not succeeding to the level that you wanted to. So certainly when I'm failing, I have no problem bailing. But if I'm, I'd say if I've got traction, I won't necessarily give up just because I haven't reached that pinnacle because, well, for me, usually I put a goal out there that's too high or unrealistic, and usually that doesn't get me down. But maybe you've seen a case where I'm not aware of that.
Okay, fair enough.
Thanks.
Anne-Marie.
Okay, so this is sort of a nice segue into my question. When you talk about having this, well, the backlog, and sort of, I guess, having this internal sort of analysis that you do of yourself, do you ever take into account external people who say things to you about yourself and you go, really? Mm-hmm. And you say, look, I don't see myself as that type of person. And then on reflection, you go, well, actually, they've got a really valid point. There is something about that I need, and you take that into your, I guess, backlog or dynamics.
Absolutely. That's typically one of the provokers. So one of the most shocking ones was at this company. I sent an email out. Somebody responded in all caps. Angry words in all caps. Now, they weren't really angry words. It was just all caps. And I just very tersely replied, and I went, well, if this doesn't apply to you, no big deal. Just forget about it. And this person came into my office, shut the door, and cried and told me what a horrible person I was. And I thought, there's got to be something, right? There's got to be something. And I just said, when you calm down, whenever that is, can we just chat about this? Because I think I stepped in something I didn't mean to, and I'm happy to fix it. Now, if I did it intentionally, I'll just say, go away. I mean, if I did, I'll own it, right? If I say, no, I meant that, I was really actually just trying to be terse and make you be quiet and go away. And I'm sorry if that offended you, but I do that sometimes. And if that offends you, I'll try to be much more aware of that, so I'm not crossing your boundary. And I need people. I mean, John has a few times, several people in this room have, articulated a boundary with me. Now, I don't always have the best memory, but I try to respect that. So often the provoker, not the thing that comes along to validate what I've already seen. It's usually the thing that shows me something I have never seen.
Perfect. Jeanne, other figure skater.
And the one that also competed at that same championship. But the thing is you will never see that video of me on a public stage. And that leads me to exactly what I was going to say, is that how brave Dawn was. Because, yes, I did encourage her to compete. She was fabulous, despite what she says. But there was a lesson that I learned from her. I have more years of skating behind me and more years of lessons behind me. But what I learned from Dawn and many other new people, and I take to skate to testing, is that there's so much you can learn from bravery, and there's so much you can learn from people who are willing to try. And the fact that, Dawn, you showed that video makes me think, shoot, now I gotta do something like that, because that was huge. I'm going, oh my God. So thank you for showing that. It brought back a lot of memories.
I knew I bought it for a reason. I just didn't know what it was at the time.
Don't talk without the mic. The mic, I do, because no one cares at home what I say.
Besides, we can all hear him wherever he is.
Yeah, no, I was commenting that it's past the statute of limitations when she showed that movie.
I could have changed the names to protect the guilty, but I didn't.
Thank you. I hate to counter something so beautiful as that statement with a very negative experience. My sister had to be hospitalized for a long time when she had fun making mistakes, learning how to ski. And there's a lot of failures we can learn from and a lot of successes we can work from. And I think perseverance and all that stuff is wonderful. I spent a lot of time applying retrospectives to software engineering. And my deep work on this was mostly in 2002, 2003. And what I learned is one thing that's very important in retrospective. When you're doing retrospective, you're looking at it in a clouded vision of the world. What you see you did is not necessarily what you did, and what you learn is maybe what you want to learn. There's huge biases there.
Yep.
So I think that one of the lessons I learned about retrospectives is to, sleep on it, and maybe after you've done some retrospectives, maybe you should talk to other people and get some perspectives from others, not just from yourself. And I just wanted to share that. There's sometimes, we fail, we come up, we're inspiring people, but we also take huge risks, the snowboarding risks, the skiing risks, those things. They're real risks, and testing, we all do, in our technical work, we all take certain risks too. So just wanted to share that. Look at both sides, and remember when you're looking at what you did, it's through a sort of a clouded vision, my experience.
Absolutely, and thank you, Rob. And if I didn't articulate it well enough, the little piece of my model where I said research, I said talk to other people, right, get that external perspective, maybe read some books. So I have a book, and thank you, Rob, for bringing that up so I remember to talk about it. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And just a couple things in here. The first chunk of the book is called Two Systems. The second one, Heuristics and Biases. This might be in our wheelhouse. Part 3, Overconfidence. That's one of the things that our biases can lead us to. So a lot of this has to do with judgments, decisions, and making choices. And since I really want to live with no regrets, I want to own my choices, and I want to know why I decide to do the things that I do. This is a fabulous book, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Just a comment that many people come to these functions and hear great things that they think are good and then go home and don't do them. One comment that you brought up was that you bare your soul and admit when you've done something wrong, or you feel you don't know something. And I believe you said you did it to your managers or your bosses.
Yeah.
I do the same thing. And I have never had never had an occurrence where they countered what I said because I had the wrong impression of what I was doing. And they said, no. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, get over it. Because other people know what you do. And like Rob was just saying, it's a different perspective when it's from yourself.
Right.
You need to let people know that so that they can bolster you so you have more confidence.
Right. Catch you out, give you feedback. Excellent. Thank you.
Check. Following on a bit from this comment, I was talking a little bit yesterday about the fact that too very often, especially with we come to conferences, we get energized, and then we come back and we're expecting that, hey, I've got all this great information and I want to share it with you and we want to do all these things, and they look at you like you're from Mars, and it goes on the back burner and never gets touched again, and you just kind of kick the ground and say, oh, well, I tried. Well, here's the thing. The biggest problem that we all face is if we want to have an excuse to complain and say, I tried, but to have no reason to go any farther, ask permission. Now, there are times when you absolutely have to ask permission. Hey, I'm going to take down the entire network with a denial of service test. Is that okay? Ask permission for that, yes. But for most everything else you can do, especially if it's a small incremental improvement, don't ask. Do it quietly. Just try it. It might not work. You'll be the first one to find out if it doesn't work, and you can just say, okay, that was stupid, and move on. And no one needs to be the wiser. But if it's not stupid, and you find out you've got something that is really cool, let your actions speak it. And then they say, hey, what are you doing? That's kind of neat. I'm impressed. I'd like to know more about that. Oh, yeah, this is something I picked up at CAST. I thought this would be cool to try out. Let's stop trying to ask for permission to do things that are in our power to do. The only reason you should ever have to ask permission is if you're really looking for cover for someone to say no.
Fair enough. I call it scope of control. So not at that company, but the next one. It took me a little while to get a handle on scope of control. What can I affect? What can I make decisions about and changes regarding that could improve my situation? And so maybe like 5 years later, I got more of a grip on that. Thanks, Michael.
2 minutes left and one more comment, 84.
So, thank
Sorry,
you, first
we're
of
on.
all, for all of that. That was awesome, and it hit
Thanks.
home on many levels. I've noticed in my own personal experience that typically things that are things that I need to work on are generally experiences that I have with other people that elicit an emotional response in me. And so I've found that those tend to be, there are those triggers there that kind of, send me into a, well, either a really negative response in terms of emotionally getting really, really pent up about something or worked up about something. And it's one of those, hey, pay attention to that because there's something going on here.
Yes.
And my question for you is if you found, sometimes I've noticed that can actually almost be paralyzing in a sense because you get so worked up about it. And I think especially testers, we tend to overanalyze. And so we'll go into this negative spiral of, okay. And it almost is like you hit a brick wall. So do you have any tricks for overcoming that?
Overcoming the negative or the emotional. I'll take the emotional because that one I have a better solution for. When I get really kind of angry, tense, and I'm going to say angry words, and I shouldn't, I scream inside my head. And if you've never done it, you should try it, like in a meeting when you're just going to lose it, right? And we had a guy who used to pound on the tables and yell and scream, and he was just the crazy guy, but he was good and we liked to have him around, so we put up with it. But if that's not how you want to be in that situation, find some sort of way to manage it. And that way may be, excuse me, I need to go take care of something, I got a thing, and I'll be right back, right? And do whatever you need to do to switch gears to kind of take the focus off that, get yourself back to square, and then see if you can get a little perspective on that.